Jake Morrison knew he was going to die. His small research ship had been torn apart by space pirates 3 hours ago. Now he floated in the cold darkness between stars with only his emergency suit keeping him alive. The oxygen meter on his wrist showed 11 minutes left. He had been studying strange energy readings in this empty sector when the attack came. 3 unmarked ships had appeared from nowhere and opened fire without warning. Jake barely made it to the escape pod before his ship exploded. Now debris from the research vessel drifted around him like metallic snow. Jake closed his eyes and tried not to think about Earth. He tried not to think about his sister Karen, who would never know what happened to him. He tried not to think about all the discoveries he would never make. The oxygen meter now read 9 minutes. That was when the lights appeared. At first, Jake thought his mind was playing tricks on him. The lights were soft and blue, moving through the debris field like curious fish. Then he saw the ship itself. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. The hull seemed to be made of crystal that glowed from within. It moved without any visible engines, silent and graceful as a swan. A beam of light surrounded Jake and pulled him toward the alien vessel. He felt no fear, only wonder. After 30 years of searching the stars, humanity had finally found proof. They were not alone. The ship's hull opened like flower petals. Jake found himself in a chamber filled with warm light and strange music. The air tasted clean and sweet. 3 beings approached him, and Jake forgot how to breathe. They were tall and thin with pale skin that sparkled like starlight. Their eyes were large and kind, colored like deep ocean water. When they moved, patterns of light rippled across their skin. They wore robes that seemed to be made from liquid moonlight. One of them stepped forward and touched a device on her wrist. When she spoke, Jake understood every word through some kind of translation system. "Welcome, human. I am Dr. Lila Voss of the Cathara people. You are safe now." Jake tried to speak but only managed to whisper. "Thank you." Dr. Voss helped him to a chair that adjusted itself to fit his body perfectly. She ran a small device over his suit, checking his condition. "You have suffered no serious harm. Your people build good protection gear." "My people?" Jake asked. "You know about humans?" "We have been watching your species for some time. You show great promise. Your people reach for the stars with such determination." Another Cathara approached, this one with silver patterns dancing across his skin. Dr. Voss introduced him as Captain Morden. The captain spoke with a voice like distant thunder. "We are honored to meet you, Jake Morrison. Your species fascinates us. Most young civilizations destroy themselves or hide from the universe. Humans do neither." Jake looked around the chamber, amazed by the technology surrounding him. The walls seemed alive, pulsing gently with soft light. "Where are you taking me?" Dr. Voss's expression became sad. "To our fleet. We are all that remains of the Cathara people." Over the next few hours, Jake learned the terrible truth. The Cathara had once lived on a beautiful world called Thys Prime. They were a peaceful people who spent their time creating art, studying science, and exploring the galaxy. They had no armies, no weapons, no knowledge of war. Then the Devourers came. The Devourers were not alive in any way Jake could understand. They were machines, but they thought and planned like living beings. They moved from star to star, consuming entire worlds and everyone on them. The Devourers turned living beings into energy to power their endless expansion across the galaxy. Sars had no warning, Dr. Voss explained as she showed Jake images of Thys Prime. The planet had been beautiful, covered with crystal cities and floating gardens. They arrived without any message or demand. They simply began harvesting our world. The Cathara had tried to fight, but their peaceful nature worked against them. They had no weapons that could harm the Devourers. Their ships were built for exploration, not battle. In 3 days, their civilization fell. "How many of you escaped?" Jake asked. Captain Morden answered. 800,000 from a population of 4 billion. We have been running for 3 years now, searching for a new home. Jake felt sick. An entire civilization had been nearly destroyed while humanity remained ignorant of the danger. "Why haven't you asked other species for help?" "We have tried," Dr. Voss said. Most species flee when they hear about the devourers. Others offer sympathy but no aid. A few civilizations have hidden us for short periods, but they always ask us to leave when the danger becomes too great. The ship shuddered slightly, and Jake realized they were dropping out of whatever faster-than-light travel the Cathara used. Through a large window, he saw something that took his breath away. Dozens of ships floated in the darkness of space. Some were as beautiful as the one he was on, made of glowing crystal and flowing lines. Others looked hastily built, clearly refugee vessels meant only to keep people alive. Jake could see gardens growing inside transparent sections of the larger ships. Children played in zero-gravity chambers while adults watched with tired eyes. "This is all that remains of our people," Captain Morden said quietly. Jake stared at the refugee fleet and felt something burning in his chest. These gentle beings had saved his life when they had every reason to think only of their own survival. They had shared their story with him, a stranger from a species they barely knew. "Take me to Earth," Jake said suddenly. Dr. Voss looked surprised. "Your homeworld, but the journey will take many months, even with our fastest ships. We cannot spare the resources for such a long voyage." Jake turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her step back. It was a look the Cathara had never developed, something that came from a species that had fought for survival since the beginning of time. "Doctor, you saved my life when you could have left me to die. You trusted me with your story and your pain. Now let me tell you something about humans." Jake moved to the window and looked out at the refugee fleet. "My people have a saying, we never leave anyone behind. You saved one human today. I'm going to make sure humanity returns to save you all." Dr. Voss and Captain Morden exchanged glances. They had studied human culture, but they had never seen this fierce loyalty in person. Something about Jake's promise made them believe that perhaps their long flight was finally over. Perhaps they had found the allies they needed to take back their home. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the United Earth Council in Geneva. The room buzzed with nervous energy as world leaders saw aliens for the first time. Dr. Lila Voss stood beside him, her skin patterns glowing softly in the bright lights. Ambassador Zenthara, the elected speaker for the Cathara refugees, completed their small group. President Catherine Murphy of the American Federation called for silence. The room fell quiet as she looked directly at Jake. "Commander Morrison, please tell us why you have brought these beings to Earth." Jake stepped forward. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's speakers. 6 months ago, I was dying in space. These people saved my life when they had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Now I'm asking Earth to return that favor." The Brazilian representative, President Carlos Santos, leaned forward in his chair. "You're asking us to go to war with machines we've never seen to save people we've just met. What proof do we have that these devourers even exist?" Dr. Voss activated a small device. Holographic images filled the air above the assembly floor. The delegates saw a beautiful crystal city under a purple sky. Then the image changed, showing the same place covered in black metal structures. Mechanical creatures moved between the buildings, harvesting everything that had once been alive. "This was our capital city on Thys Prime," Dr. Voss said. Her voice remained steady, but Jake could see the pain in her glowing eyes. "The devourers converted everything. Our homes, our art, our people. They turned it all into energy to build more of themselves." General Paul Davis, head of Earth's military forces, studied the tactical displays. "How many worlds have these machines taken?" 17 civilizations completely destroyed," Ambassador Zenthara replied. "Hundreds more damaged or scattered. The devourers have been spreading across this galaxy for over 1,000 years." Secretary of State Helen Foster asked the question everyone was thinking. "If they're so powerful, what makes you think we can stop them?" Jake looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. Some showed fear, others curiosity. A few looked angry at being asked to risk their world for strangers. "Because we're human," Jake said simply. "Dr. Voss, show them the historical files you've been studying." The holographic display changed again. Now it showed scenes from Earth's past. The delegates saw soldiers at Valley Forge, pilots over London, Marines on Pacific Islands. They saw ordinary people doing extraordinary things when faced with impossible odds. Dr. Voss spoke as the images played. We have studied your species for many decades. You are unique among all the civilizations we have encountered. When faced with extinction, most species either surrender or hide. Humans fight. The Chinese premier Li Wei shook his head. Fighting is not always wise. Sometimes survival requires retreat. The Devourers don't allow retreat, Ambassador Zenthara said. They follow, they consume, they move on. There is no negotiation, no mercy, no escape. The only choice is to fight or die. Russian President Viktor Petrov raised his hand. What can your people offer us in this fight? What technology do you bring? Dr. Voss gestured and new images appeared. The delegates saw Cathera medical devices that could heal wounds in minutes. They saw energy sources that could power entire cities without pollution. They saw ships that could travel between stars in weeks instead of centuries. We offer everything. We have, she said. Our knowledge, our ships, our lives. But we cannot win alone. We are teachers and artists and scientists. You are warriors. The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about the risks of bringing alien attention to Earth. They questioned whether humanity was ready for interstellar war. They worried about the cost in lives and resources. President Murphy called for a brief recess. Jake found himself in a quiet hallway with Dr. Voss and Ambassador Zenthara. The Cathara leaders' skin patterns had dimmed with exhaustion. They fear for their world, Zenthara said. I understand their caution. Fear is smart, Jake replied. But humans don't let fear stop them from doing what's right. When the session resumed, Jake asked for permission to address the assembly one final time. He walked to the center of the floor and looked up at the delegates from every nation on Earth. 3 years ago, the Cathara watched their world burn. They could have hidden in some distant corner of the galaxy and hoped the Devourers never found them. Instead, they risked their lives to save one human they had never met. Jake's voice grew stronger. That human was me. I'm alive because strangers decided my life was worth saving. Now those same strangers are asking us to help them save what's left of their people. He turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates around the room. The Devourers are coming whether we fight them or not. They consume everything in their path. We can face them now, with allies who understand their tactics, or we can wait until we stand alone. The Canadian Prime Minister, Rachel Thompson, stood up. What guarantee do we have that we can win? Jake smiled, and something in his expression made several delegates sit back in their chairs. Ma'am, humans have never needed a guarantee to do what's right. We fought the British Empire with farmers and hunters. We stopped fascism with factory workers and shopkeepers. We've been winning impossible fights since we climbed down from the trees. Ambassador Zenthara stepped forward. If I may speak to this assembly. Her voice carried a musical quality that made everyone listen. My people created beautiful art and discovered the secrets of stars. We thought that was enough. But beauty means nothing if there is no one left to see it. Knowledge is worthless if there is no one to learn it. She gestured toward Jake. This human showed us something we had forgotten. Sometimes the most beautiful thing you can create is hope. Sometimes the greatest knowledge is knowing when to fight. The vote was scheduled for the next day. Jake spent the night walking through Geneva's old streets with Dr. Voss. She had never seen Earth before, and she marveled at the ancient buildings mixed with modern technology. Your cities are so different from ours, she said. We built everything from crystal and light. You use stone and metal. Different materials, same purpose, Jake replied. Shelter, safety, community. I think our peoples have more in common than you realize. The next morning, the delegates cast their votes. Jake held his breath as the results appeared on the main display. 187 votes for military action. 156 against. 23 abstentions. It was enough. President Murphy stood and addressed the assembly. The United Earth Council authorizes the formation of a joint human Cathara military force to combat the Devourer threat. May God help us all. As the delegates Filed out, Jake felt a hand on his shoulder. General Davis stood behind him, his weathered face serious. "Morrison, I hope you know what you've gotten us into." Jake looked at Dr. Voss, who was speaking quietly with other Kythra representatives. Her skin patterns pulsed with colors he had learned meant hope and gratitude. "General, I know exactly what we've gotten into," Jake said. "We've gotten into a fight worth having." Admiral Lisa Park walked through the construction yards orbiting Earth and felt like she was witnessing a miracle. 18 months had passed since the Council vote, and humanity had transformed itself into a spacefaring military power. The orbital shipyards that once built cargo haulers and research vessels now produced warships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The flagship of the new fleet floated before her like a metal mountain. The UES Defiance stretched over a mile long, its hull bristling with weapons that combined human engineering with Kythera energy technology. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Ma'am, the morning briefing is ready," said Captain Roy Mitchell, her chief of staff. He had been a cargo pilot 2 years ago, but the crisis had promoted capable people quickly. Now he commanded the carrier UES Valiant, which housed 200 fighters in its vast hangar bays. Admiral Park followed him to the briefing room where the fleet's senior officers waited. These men and women represented the best of both worlds. Human tactical thinking combined with Kythera scientific knowledge had created strategies that neither species could have developed alone. Commander Jake Morrison entered the room with Dr. Lila Voss at his side. Jake now wore the uniform of the combined fleet, a new organization that treated humans and Kythera as equals. Dr. Voss had spent the last year and a half working with human engineers to create the medical technology that would keep their people alive in the coming battle. "Status report," Admiral Park said as she took her seat. Colonel Amy Santos stood first. She commanded the Stellar Marine Corps, a new branch of the military trained to fight in space environments. Her soldiers wore armor that mixed human durability with Kythera shielding technology. "We have 15,000 Marines ready for deployment, Admiral. They've trained in zero-gravity combat, shipboarding operations, and hostile environment survival. The new armor can keep a soldier alive in vacuum for 6 hours." Captain Mitchell presented the fleet status. 200 ships are ready for departure. That includes 50 destroyers, 30 cruisers, 12 carriers, and the command dreadnought, Defiance. The smaller ships are scouts, supply vessels, and troop transports. Dr. Voss activated the holographic display showing their destination. "Our intelligence indicates the Devourers are building something massive in the Kepler 442 system. Long-range sensors suggest a constructor ship capable of producing thousands of smaller vessels." The room fell quiet as everyone studied the tactical display. The Devourer facility was enormous, larger than Earth's moon. Hundreds of smaller ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Commander Eric Turner, the fleet's strategic planner, highlighted the problems they faced. "We'll be outnumbered at least 50 to 1. The Devourers have had 3 years to fortify this position. Even with our technological advantages, the odds are not in our favor." Admiral Park looked around the table at her officers. 6 months ago, most of them had been civilians with no military experience. Now they were preparing to lead humanity's first interstellar war. "The Kythera refugee fleet will provide support," Jake added. "They can't fight, but their ships can serve as mobile hospitals and supply bases." Dr. Voss has also identified several Kythera prison ships in the system. Dr. Voss's skin patterns darkened with sadness. "Over 2 million of our people are being held for harvesting. The Devourers keep us alive until they need the energy. It's a more efficient process than immediate conversion." Lieutenant Commander Nina Brooks, pilot of the experimental ship UES Phoenix, raised her hand. "What about the new weapons systems?" "The tests have been promising." Colonel Santos nodded. "The kinetic bombardment system works perfectly. We can accelerate projectiles to 20% of light speed using Kythera gravity manipulation. The impact releases more energy than nuclear weapons." "The problem isn't our weapons," Captain Mitchell said. "It's the numbers. Even if every shot hits, we don't have enough ammunition to destroy their entire fleet." Admiral Park stood and walked to the tactical display. She touched the image of the constructor ship and it expanded, showing detailed scans of its structure. "We're not going there to win a fair fight," she said. We're going there to rescue the Kithra prisoners and cripple the Devourer's ability to build new ships. If we can destroy this facility, it will set back their expansion by decades. Dr. Voss joined her at the display. The prison ships are here, in the shadow of the constructor. The Devourers keep them close for easy access. If we can reach them, we save 2 million people and hurt the enemy at the same time, Jake finished. But getting there won't be easy. Commander Turner outlined the battle plan. Phase 1. Long-range missile strikes to thin their outer defenses. Phase 2. Fighter squadrons engage their mobile units while the main fleet pushes toward the constructor. Phase 3. Marine boarding parties secure the prison ships while the fleet provides cover. What about extraction? Colonel Santos asked. Even if we succeed, how do we get everyone out? Admiral Park smiled grimly. That's where human stubbornness comes in handy. We keep fighting until everyone is safe, no matter what it costs. The meeting continued for 3 hours as they refined the battle plan. Every detail was examined, every contingency planned for. The officers knew they were preparing for the most dangerous mission in human history. After the meeting, Jake and Dr. Voss walked through the ship's corridors toward the observation deck. They passed human and Kithra crew members working side by side, their different biologies perfectly suited for different tasks. Are you afraid? Dr. Voss asked as they reached the viewing window. Outside, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the starfield. Jake considered the question seriously. Terrified, but that's not going to stop us. Dr. Voss's skin patterns shifted to colors Jake had learned meant curiosity and confusion. I still don't understand your species. You know this mission will likely fail. You know many of you will die, yet you proceed anyway. That's what makes us human, Jake replied. We do what needs to be done even when the odds are impossible. Your people saved one human when you could have ignored me and stayed hidden. Now humanity is risking everything to save your people. And if we all die in the attempt? Jake looked out at the stars where the Devourer threat waited. Then we die fighting for something that matters. That's better than living in fear. The next morning, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Defiance as the fleet prepared to depart. 200 ships stretched across Earth's orbital space, their crews representing the best of human determination and Cathara knowledge. All ships report ready for departure, Captain Mitchell announced. Admiral Park looked one last time at Earth, knowing that some of the people under her command would never see their home again. Then she turned to face the stars and the greatest challenge humanity had ever accepted. Set course for Kepler 442, she ordered. Maximum speed. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when humans keep their promises. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying the hopes of 2 species toward a battle that would decide the fate of millions. The human Cathara fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system and found hell waiting for them. The Devourer constructor ship dominated the center of the system like a mechanical planet, its surface crawling with building activity. Hundreds of sleek black vessels moved in perfect formation around it, their hulls reflecting no light. Admiral Lisa Park stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and felt her heart sink. Intelligence reports had underestimated the enemy strength. Over 800 Devourer ships waited for them, not the 500 they had expected. All ships, this is Admiral Park, she announced over the fleet communication system. I won't lie to you. The odds are worse than we thought. But remember why we're here. 2 million Kithra prisoners are counting on us. We didn't come this far to fail now. Captain Roy Mitchell's voice crackled through the comm from the carrier Valiant. Fighter squadrons are ready for launch, Admiral. My pilots are eager to show these machines what human stubbornness looks like. Commander Jake Morrison stood beside Dr. Lila Voss at the tactical station. They watched as the Devourer fleet began moving toward them with mechanical precision. No challenge was issued, no demands made. The machines simply came to destroy. Begin Phase 1, Admiral Park ordered. Long-range missile strike. The fleet's destroyers and cruisers launched their opening salvo. Thousands of missiles streaked across the void, their warheads designed to punch through energy shields with kinetic force. The Devourers responded with point defense systems that filled space with deadly light. Many missiles were destroyed, but enough got through to damage the enemy's outer formation. 3 Devourer ships exploded in brilliant flashes, their debris spinning away into darkness. Phase 2. Launch fighters. Admiral Park commanded. Captain Mitchell's carriers opened their hangar bays and released clouds of small craft. Human pilots flew ships that combined the best of both technologies. Kythera shields and gravity drives powered by human fusion reactors and armed with kinetic weapons that could punch through any armor. The space between the two fleets filled with deadly light as fighters engaged the Devourer screening force. Human pilots flew with a reckless creativity that confused the machine intelligence. They used tactics that made no tactical sense but worked anyway. Lieutenant Commander Nina Brooks piloted the experimental ship Phoenix through the chaos. Her vessel was smaller than a fighter but faster than anything else in the fleet. She dove between Devourer ships, targeting their sensor arrays and communication systems. "Phoenix to Fleet Command," she reported as she disabled another enemy vessel. "The machines are having trouble coordinating. Their network connections are vulnerable to focused attack." Admiral Park saw the opportunity immediately. "All ships, target communication nodes. Disrupt their ability to work together." The battle plan was working, but at a terrible cost. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. The Deviant shuddered as enemy fire struck its shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. "Medical Bay 2 is offline." Dr. Voss immediately headed for the damaged section. Kythera healing technology could save lives that would otherwise be lost, but only if she could reach the wounded in time. Meanwhile, Colonel Amy Santos prepared her Marines for the most dangerous part of the mission. The prison ships were visible now, dark vessels tethered to the constructor like metal fruit on a deadly tree. "Boarding shuttles away," Colonel Santos reported as her Marines launched toward the enemy facility. They flew small, fast ships designed to slip through the battle and reach their targets before the Devourers could respond. Commander Jake Morrison led one of the boarding parties. His shuttle raced through a storm of weapons fire toward a prison ship that held 50,000 Kythera civilians. The shuttle's pilot, a young woman named Lieutenant Sarah Davis, flew with the skill that had made her one of Earth's best test pilots. 30 seconds to contact," Lieutenant Davis announced as they approached the prison ship's docking bay. The shuttle slammed into the alien vessel's hull and immediately began cutting through the metal barrier. Jake and his team of Marines and Kythera technicians poured through the breach into a corridor filled with mechanical horrors. The Devourers had left Guardian units aboard each prison ship. These machines were designed to prevent escapes, and they attacked the boarding party with lethal efficiency. Jake's team fought through corridors that pulsed with alien energy, racing against time to reach the prisoners. They found the Kythera in vast holding chambers, weak from years of captivity but still alive. Dr. Voss had provided Jake with portable medical units that could stabilize the prisoners for transport. "Get them to the shuttles," Jake ordered his Marines. "We're taking everyone." Back in the main battle, Admiral Park watched helplessly as the Defiance took more damage. Half her fleet was destroyed or disabled. The Devourer constructor continued, building new ships even as the battle raged around it. That was when Lieutenant Commander Brooks made her decision. "All ships, this is Phoenix," she announced over the communication system. "I'm making a run on the constructor's power core. Tell my family I love them." Before anyone could stop her, Brooks accelerated her small ship to maximum speed and dove toward the massive enemy facility. Devourer weapons focused on her, but the Phoenix was too small and fast to hit consistently. She reached the constructor's surface and flew along its hull until she found what she was looking for, a massive energy conduit that fed power to the construction base. Brooks armed every weapon on her ship and flew straight into the conduit. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system. The constructor's power grid collapsed in a cascade of secondary explosions. Construction stopped immediately as the
massive facility went dark. But the victory came at a terrible price. Admiral Park's flagship was crippled, its engines dead and weapons offline. Captain Mitchell's carrier was destroyed, taking 200 fighters with it. Over half the human,
Fleet was gone. Commander Morrison, now the ranking officer, found himself in command of the survivors. His boarding teams had rescued 800,000 Cathra prisoners, but over 1 million more remained trapped in ships they couldn't reach. The remaining Devourer ships were regrouping, preparing for a final assault that would destroy what was left of the human fleet. Morrison faced an impossible choice: retreat with the prisoners they had saved, or continue fighting for those still trapped. He looked at the tactical display and saw 17 more systems marked with Cathara prison facilities. Millions of civilians waited in mechanical hell for rescue that might never come. "All ships, this is Commander Morrison," he announced. "Captain Mitchell's sacrifice bought us time, but we have a decision to make. We can retreat now with the people we've saved, or we can continue the mission." One by one, every surviving ship in the fleet reported in. Captain Lisa Chen of the destroyer Intrepid spoke for them all. "Sir, we didn't come this far to save only some of them. The crew of the Intrepid volunteers to continue." Morrison felt something burning in his chest as every ship in the fleet made the same report. These people had seen friends die and ships destroyed, but they refused to abandon the mission. "Then we continue," Morrison said. "All ships prepare for hyperspace jump to the next system. We have more people to save." Dr. Voss approached him as the battered fleet prepared to leave. Her skin pattern showed colors he had never seen before, emotions too complex for human understanding. "Your people continue to amaze me," she said. "Even in defeat, you refuse to surrender." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing their next destination. More Devourer ships waited there, along with more prisoners who needed rescue. "Doctor, we haven't been defeated, we've just gotten started." 2 years after the first battle at Kepler 442, the combined fleet returned to Earth's solar system. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberation and watched his homeworld grow larger on the main screen. Behind him stretched a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Over 600 ships filled the space around Earth. Human vessels bore the scars of countless battles alongside pristine Cathra craft that had been built in hidden shipyards throughout their campaign. But most amazing were the ships from 14 other species that had joined their cause. Dr. Lila Voss joined Jake at the observation window. Her skin patterns glowed with colors that meant joy and homecoming. Beside her stood Council Leader Thayana, a Cathara who had been among the last prisoners rescued from Devourer processing facilities. "I never thought I would see Earth again," Jake said quietly. "There were times I was sure we would all die in some distant system." Dr. Voss smiled, an expression she had learned from humans during their long campaign. "You kept your promise. Every single Cathara has been rescued. Over 2 million people are free because humans refused to abandon us." The mission had grown far beyond anyone's original plans. What began as a rescue operation had become a galaxy-wide rebellion against the Devourers. Each system they liberated revealed more prisoners from other species. The machines had been storing conquered populations for centuries, keeping them alive for eventual harvesting. Captain Roy Mitchell's replacement, Captain Sarah Chen, approached with the latest reports. She had been promoted after Mitchell's heroic sacrifice at the constructor facility. "Admiral, Earth Defense Command is requesting permission to escort the fleet to orbital stations. President Murphy wants to address the entire combined council as soon as possible." Jake nodded and activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Welcome home. You have accomplished something that will be remembered for generations. Today marks not just our return, but the birth of something new in this galaxy." The journey to Earth's orbital platforms took several hours. Jake used the time to review everything that had happened since they first left the solar system. The campaign had been brutal. They lost ships and crew members in every system they entered. The Devourers never showed mercy, never offered terms, never retreated. But human determination had proven stronger than machine logic. The turning point came when they encountered the Zelani, an insectoid species that had been fighting the Devourers for decades. Unlike the peaceful Cathara, the Zelani were natural warriors with technology specifically designed for combat. When they learned that humans were willing to fight alongside alien allies, They immediately joined the cause. More species followed. The plant-like Verdani brought biological weapons that could disable devourer systems. The energy beings called Nexus provided intelligence about machine weaknesses. Each new ally made the fleet stronger and more capable, but it was human leadership that held the alliance together. Other species contributed technology and numbers, but humans provided something unique: the absolute refusal to leave anyone behind. No matter how dangerous the rescue, no matter how small the group of prisoners, the human commanders insisted on saving everyone. Dr. Voss had spent months studying this human trait. Your people are the first species we have encountered that values individual lives over statistical outcomes, she had told Jake after a particularly dangerous rescue mission. Most civilizations would sacrifice a few to save many. Humans try to save everyone. Now, as the fleet approached Earth's orbital stations, Jake could see the fruits of that philosophy. The rescued populations had become the foundation of something unprecedented, a true galactic alliance based on mutual aid rather than conquest. President Catherine Murphy greeted the returning heroes in the same chamber where the decision to fight had been made 3 years earlier. But this time the room held representatives from 16 different species, all of whom had pledged to join what they now called the Terran Alliance. When we voted to help the Cathara, President Murphy said, addressing the assembled delegates, we thought we were risking everything to save one species. Instead, we discovered something about ourselves and our place in the galaxy. Jake stood to address the gathering. Looking out at the diverse crowd of beings from across known space, he felt the weight of history settling around them. 3 years ago, the Cathara saved one human who was dying in the void between stars. They had no reason to help me except that it was the right thing to do. That single act of kindness started something that has changed the galaxy forever. The audience listened intently as Jake continued. We didn't set out to build an alliance or start a war. We just wanted to repay a debt of honor. But we learned something important along the way. The strongest bonds are not formed by treaties or trade agreements. They are formed when people risk everything to protect each other. Council leader, Theana, rose to speak. She had spent months learning English, considering it a debt of honor to communicate in the language of her rescuers. The Cathara have a saying, a single voice singing alone is beautiful, but many voices in harmony can move mountains. You humans taught us that sometimes, to create harmony, someone must be willing to fight for the right to sing. Ambassador, Keltar of the Zelani clicked his mandibles in agreement. The Devourers believed that conquest was the only path to galactic dominance. They were wrong. Protection is stronger than conquest. Unity is more powerful than assimilation. The formal ceremonies continued for hours, but Jake found his attention drawn to the view outside the Great Hall's windows. Ships from dozens of worlds patrolled the Sol system, while construction crews worked on joint research facilities throughout human space. The Devourers were still out there somewhere, but their expansion had been stopped. For the first time in centuries, they faced organized resistance from species working together. Their analytical systems could not cope with the seemingly irrational decisions of beings who prioritized compassion over efficiency. Dr. Voss joined Jake at the window as the meeting continued behind them. What will you do now? She asked. The war is not over, but humanity has proven its point. You could return to your exploration of space. Jake watched a group of Cathara children playing in the zero-gravity recreation area of a nearby station. They were laughing, a sound that had been absent from their species for 3 long years. Doctor, we came into space looking for new worlds to explore and new knowledge to discover. But we found something better. What is that? Jake smiled as he watched human and alien children playing together, their different biologies making no difference in their friendship. We found a family worth fighting for. The Terran Alliance would grow in the years that followed. More species would join as word spread of beings who fought not for conquest, but for protection. The Devourers would face defeat after defeat as their enemies learned to work together instead of hiding in isolation. But on that day, as Earth's sun set behind the orbital stations filled with refugees who had become allies, Jake Morrison knew that humanity had found its true purpose among the stars. They were not just explorers or conquerors. They were protectors, guardians of the idea that every life had value and every civilization deserved to survive. One human had been saved by strangers who owed him nothing. In return, humanity had saved millions and changed the galaxy forever. It was, Jake thought, a fair trade.